We have a great group of folks here that all interestingly, the four of us on the stage are from North American firms, and gathering here in Barcelona. It's great because there is really no equivalent that I can think of where we could have this conversation with all of you as startups here. Maybe you can correct me on that. Certainly, this meeting's become so efficient that we don't get time for introductions, so I'm only going to introduce you by name and firm and give you a chance to introduce yourself and your organization. Matt, let's start with you on the end, as Senior Director of Checkerspot. Tell us a little bit.
Sure, yeah, so I'm Matt Engler. I lead business development at Checkerspot. And really focused on our B2B commercial activities, which is a little different than some companies that we have to specify B2B because we sort of go beyond that at Checkerspot and go all the way to consumers. Been with Checkerspot about 9 months, been in this exciting industry, I guess about the past 10 years through several startups, so I have some experience with what can go right and what can go wrong. Looking forward to the panel and telling you a little bit more about Checkerspot as well. Great, and Jesse, we just heard a little bit about Ginkgo, but tell us a little bit more about you and your role there.
Sure, thanks. So I'm on the growth team at Ginkgo, which is a team that operates at kind of the intersection of BD and the technical team, as well as creative and marketing, finding ways to package the things that Ginkgo does, bundle them into structured offerings, as Kevin highlighted. My sort of main two hats I wear there are working on our food and ag verticals, and then figuring out sort of broad strategic ways to engage with startups. My background is as a biologist who kind of drifted over to BD territory, spent some time in startups, and then on the funding side of research for a while at DARPA and a venture firm before coming here. So seen a little bit of everything, but excited to meet all these people at this great event. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jesse. And David, Chief Scientist and Technology Officer at Meadow. So tell us.
Yeah, so my name's Dave Williamson. Oversee all of the technology development at Meadow, from our early strain engineering work all the way through our commercialization and scale up into different manufacturing assets, as well as kind of overseeing our intellectual property and licensing strategies from an in-licensing perspective.
Great. I know I warned you I was going to ask a lot of regulatory and safety questions, and that's because I'm interested in hearing your responses. But let's start off with a little bit of a lower ball. So tell me, what do you think are your key success factors that got you from startup to where you are now?
Yeah, so Checkerspot, I think we're fairly differentiated from a lot of biotech, industrial biotech companies. And I think that's what's allowed us to get to where we're at today. The easiest way to explain what we do is by the platform we have. We call the Wing platform. And there's 4 pillars of the Wing platform. The first is what you would think of as, for an industrial biotech company, we call our molecular foundry. So that's where we engineer strains. We've started with microalgae to make unique molecular building blocks. Then we move them to the second pillar in our Wing platform, which is material science. So there we actually take these building blocks, we apply chemistry to make novel chemicals and materials. So actually going from the building block ingredient to a material. The third pillar is our fabrication capabilities. So there we actually take these materials, we fabricate to build prototypes and actually make products. To animate and demonstrate what the materials can do in an actual product. And then fourth, we actually have gone all the way to consumer engagement through developing our own brand and coming to market with consumer products that animate what those materials can do in a real sense in consumer products. So the first set of products we come to market with are in the outdoor space in hard goods. So we actually build in our facility in Salt Lake backcountry skis for skiing in the mountains. And we've engineered 2 materials around those skis, a cast urethane and a rigid foam, that serve a couple different performance properties within the skis. And I think what's allowed us to be successful to this point is actually putting those materials into a product, putting them in consumers' hands, and having the consumer adoption be tremendously positive, which has led to a ton of interest from other companies in adopting our materials. So our goal isn't to become the biggest ski company. It's just a tool for us to show what our products can do. And now we're in multiple discussions and we're selling material to other companies to use in their products, because that's how we get to scale and how we get to impact. So I think kind of the breadth of the platform is really the key so far for our success today.
Terrific. David, how about you? What would you say is your key?
Yeah, so I think what we practice at Modern Meadow is what we call SynBio 2.0, which is the ability to engineer, select engineer, produce, purify, and chemically modify proteins, and then combine that with a deep material science knowledge to be able to integrate that into other materials to create a unique combination of protein and material, which create what we call bioalloys, which are basically miscible systems of protein-enabled materials. So if you're not familiar with a miscible polymer system, that was the foundation of GE Plastics, a lot of the Dow products, as well as of the Exxons of the world. We've discovered actually about 4 or 5 new alloys over the past couple of years, and that's allowed us to deliver that protein functionality using scalable production technologies. So we have a joint venture with a very prominent Italian textiles and technical textile producer called Lamonta, our BioFabrica JV, and we've actually launched products out of that this year into a number of fairly prestigious brands, in Reeve out of Asia, Everlane in the US, and then also been able to produce from a beauty perspective, because this platform is broader than just materials. It allows us to access the materials world in our biomaterials business. It also allows us to access the beauty space, and we're actually we're in the Korean market in 12 million different units, and the #1 selling face cream product there, and then also in the biomedical space as well. And the foundation of all of that success is this unique, distinctive capability where you bring protein technology know-how with material science in an additive and distinctive way to bring real functionality that you can't get with current materials that are out there, whether it's sustainability, whether it's performance, breathability, abrasion on the material side, biostimulation on the biomed of the beauty side.
Terrific. Jesse, I've been with Ginkgo on part of this startup journey for the last 5 or 6 years, but tell me, what do you think are the key factors?
Yeah, for Ginkgo, it's historically been a relentless drive to make sure we have as broad a platform as possible, because our goal is always to serve the needs of the customers, who will often get on the platform at different stages. Some people come to us with an idea, some people have a strain, they just need a tune-up. And kind of making sure that we have all the services available, and then taking each of those things and being relentless in pushing throughput, so that we can scale, make sure we completely saturate the search space on ideally a single pass through a given project, so we can deliver results to the customers quickly and get on to the next stage. It's been an exciting decade, I think, in industrial biotechnology, because the hardware solutions are starting to allow, really push how many things we can test at a given time. All the data infrastructure is meeting that need as well, and so finding ways to integrate this into a centralized platform that people can jump on, solve some problems, and then carry that product out into the world is kind of the central mission.
Great. I mean, you're here, so obviously success is there, but we're also, we heard some stories about the challenges of that success, and along the way from Tom earlier and others. And so I'm curious, Jesse, if you could continue. What was the common hurdle? What was your big hurdle? Or for me, it's always the big, hairy, audacious goal. But what was the thing that you had to, as an organization, overcome to get to where you are now? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is well before I joined. I think, early days at Ginkgo started in 2008, which I think was an interesting year to start a company. They overcame a lot of the early technical development, just building that through government support and building the foundation, which then led to Ginkgo's big break in the mid-2010s as they started to do a lot of the metabolic engineering projects, largely in sort of small molecule production, that really helped Ginkgo establish its approach to engineering synthetic biology and finding ways to scale products for partners. So I'd say that the early hurdles were just having the patient, team ready to really build all the infrastructure needed for this platform, as well as the source of patient funding from the government, to then make that big break over the last 7 to 8 years as they've started to say, all right, how can we rinse and repeat this process for as many customers as possible?
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I think getting a first product into the market is always a really big challenge, and I've run into that in the past as well. And at Checkerspot, actually the first product that came to market through a partner. So I think leveraging partners is really important, forming good partnerships. And that first product is a wicking finish. So for synthetic textiles, most synthetic textiles, they don't wick moisture. So in your running shirt, right, if it's not treated with a wicking finish, you'll feel like you're wearing a plastic bag. You'll just get soaking wet. So wicking finishes actually allow moisture to draw from the body and then evaporate. And those are all synthetic based, or traditionally have been synthetic based. And so we worked with a partner called Beyond Surface Technologies based in Switzerland, who are really experts in green chemistry and in textiles. And they were able to develop with our oil a 100% microalgal oil-based wicking finish, which can reduce carbon footprint by up to 80%. And now they sell that product globally using our product as an ingredient in it. And so I think that created a lot of momentum for us of actually having products in the market, and a partner allowed us to do that, right? So I think that was probably one of the key challenges that I was really happy to see that Checkerspot had overcome when I joined the company.
Great. David, how about you? What was one of your big challenges?
Yeah, I think similar to Matt's comments around kind of what we call the last mile, which is understanding how do you take your core foundational technology, create a set of products that are going to be unique in the marketplace, but also fulfill all of the already well-established material performance requirements. Because the brands are loath to transition to an inferior product. So for us, the establishment of our joint venture with Lamanta allowed us to access scalable production, realize the performance requirements we needed in a way that also allowed us to bring on the sustainability claims in the form of a life cycle analysis, so that we could actually speak to the brands on the performance as well as the sustainability advantages of reduced greenhouse gas by 80%, those kinds of things. And I think that oftentimes people think they're going to make that last mile themselves. And that's really hard, and because it requires the ability to iterate very quickly in a lot of these markets. And that's something as a foundational technology-driven startup we're not as good at. So having a partner who can operate at that kind of a product innovation cycle time allowed us to produce, the 300, 400, 500 meters of material that's necessary for a designer to touch the material, react to the material, make changes, and then rapidly scale and move into production from a widespread perspective. So scale is, designers will tell you they'll look at a little piece and they'll smile at you and tell you that's really exciting. And then they'll walk away and they'll go, when you can send me a roll, I'll be interested. So that was really important for us. So reaching real scale enables kind of the activation of the market, I think, for us.
And you mentioned unique and having that kind of unique thing that you're bringing to the market, and of course that's critical to success, but it makes it much harder both on the regulatory side and on the commercial adoption side. People are always a little leery of something new. So how did you deal with that, and how much of a barrier was it for you?
Well, so for us, actually having that last mile partner allowed us to go through the production steps and manage kind of the local regulatory requirements, while we were able to produce the product and scale the way we needed to. For us, it's not been as big of a challenge on the regulatory front for, I would say, materials or beauty. But however, I think it's going to be harder. If you look at the Green Deal, I think it's going to be much harder for people to bring products into the market in Europe. And even the transitions in the medical device space as they go from an MDR to an MDD world, that's going to be even more challenging. So I think having a partner helps you de-risk that front, because they know who to talk to, when conversations to have, and when to have them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jesse, how about you? Any input on kind of these unexpected parts of being unique? I mean, certainly Ginkgo can claim the uniqueness in the market. Has that been a challenge in terms of partner adoption of, your technologies?
Yeah. I mean, I think novelty requires a new type of storytelling, and I think that telling people the big vision as well as the practical reality of what you can do for them, and helping people also just understand what biology can do, I think is. We have customers who are tried and true biologists, been working in a specific sort of product category for decades, and then others who come to us without having run a product through a fermenter before, and they just say, what can biology do in this space of chemistry? And making sure that we're telling stories that address both customers and explain how we can solve problems for both, I think is a tough needle to thread, but it's also a fun challenge.
Great. Matt, do you have a particular pain point on the journey?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is, I think as an industry, we have to kind of stop relying on big name brands to actually do the innovation for us. So to take our ingredient or raw material and figure out what to do with it, right, and turn it into a real product. It's been tried over and over, and a lot of times these big brands, and the majority of the time, aren't going to do that innovation, aren't going to show like what actual products you can make. And so, what we've tried to do is de-risk that last step of getting something into the market by creating the product ourselves. And then that serves as an example for other partners to adopt the materials and see, oh yes, they've actually shown this can scale, this has performance properties in use for these types of applications, and they have confidence that Checkerspot has the capability to actually fine-tune materials for their application. Because a lot of the worst case to be in is where you have a material, you're coming to a partner, and you don't know how it's going to perform for them, and you're just hoping that they're going to try it out, and hopefully it's going to work for them. And I've just seen over and over that model just doesn't work so well.
And you found a very interesting and innovative solution to that by sort of building out the verticals. Tom was gracious in being so honest about those sleepless nights on the journey. What was most surprising that you hadn't expected you would encounter on your way?
Yeah, I think if I look back kind of over the different companies I've been with and products I've tried to help bring to market, I think seeing what listening to what customers say is important to them, a lot of times is very different from what they actually act on. And so that was a surprise to me within this industry and bringing products to market, that sustainability is important and it needs to have this property, but when it comes down to it, it didn't matter that much, right? When you're selling to them. So that's been a bit of a surprise to me along this journey, and really like that partners need to actually see from the market and listen from customers before they're going to actually make a change and adopt your product. Because that's one thing that I've learned is that brands listen to what their customers do with their money, right? And so we've seen that in our products, that competitors within the ski market, we don't really see them as competitors because they're our customers, see that there's this big adoption of our skis from Wonder Alpine, and then they're coming to us because they see that their customers are actually motivated. So that's been, I think, a huge learning for us, and it's a model we're trying to replicate as we move out into other verticals as well.
How about you, Jesse? A little bit of a different model for you, but what has surprised you in being out there in front for Ginkgo?
Yeah, I think one interesting trend that has been accelerating recently, and I'm talking just in the last 2 years, that has been something I think we looked for a long time, but are starting to see a lot of momentum building, is the amount of interest and sort of pragmatic money flowing into sort of spaces like carbon removal and sort of direct climate impact sort of technologies, whether it's hardware or biological, and all of a sudden it's something that has gone from we'd love to find ways to do this to figure out a really practical way of using engineered biology to boost regenerative ag or something like that. And it's gone from speculative to suddenly like, oh wow, people are really putting the funding to figuring out how we're going to do this. And I think it's really been a sea change in the last 2 to 3 years. I think it's an exciting opportunity, and I hope we can help companies do that.
Great. How about you, David?
Yeah, I think that maybe not so much surprising, but most heartening is the shift over the last couple of years to embrace what it means to have real-world impact, right? And what I mean by that, and I think Catherine alluded to it earlier, actually didn't allude to a point that specifically stated it, which is it's really about bringing materials at scale so that you're actually really moving the needle. Early on, I think there was a lot more emphasis on capsule collections, small demonstration lots. And I think over the past couple of years, what we're seeing is brands are coming back and they're saying, this is really important to us. If you have a material that's going to work, we're ready to kind of help make that big transition. And we're not going to go through a capsule collection. We're not just going to do something to drive, earned media. It's really going to be about working with our supply chain, scaling up and producing. So I think the balance of performance, scale, and sustainability is becoming more and more important. We talk about it at Modern Meadow all the time, and I've heard it throughout this conference over the past 2 days. And I think that's a really good step for the industry, actually.
I think it's great. I mean, the last 2 years have been really a challenge for all of us, I'd say personally as well as professionally, in terms of, the world we knew just kind of stopped. And so, figuring out how to pick up those pieces and move forward, and with those disruptions, on the one hand, it creates an opportunity. On the other hand, it creates enormous challenges. So I'm curious, how did the pandemic and this kind of disruption help you to refocus? Were you affected at all? I know personally, I was really glad to be in the sustainability space. It was great to wake up with something to look forward to working on, and the challenge of helping our clients with their day-to-day problems and getting to market. But how was that for you?
I'm not going to lie, COVID was tough.
Yeah.
As a startup, you're thinking about how do you take the work that you were doing before and do it in a very different way? How do you manage R&D work in a laboratory environment where people can't work virtually, and continue that progress? But on the other side of that, it was actually a really good time for us to take stock, focus, prioritize the work we needed to do, and really become clear about what it is that we're really unique about. And that actually made it, I think, really crystallized in our mind our strategy around this platform capability. And we started to understand the power of it and the importance of partnering for that last mile, because we did a lot of work to go to market on our own. We found that last mile, when you partner, can be so much faster. So for us, those strategic partnerships are catalytic for our growth, and that really grew out of that time, that COVID period, to kind of do a little introspection and get really good at what we needed to get good at.
Great. How about you, Jess?
So at the start of the pandemic, Ginkgo's response was to take a moment, say, what can we do as a large biotech company with an army of robots ready to do stuff in high throughput, and actually ended up posting something on their website saying, please tell us what we can do for COVID, and solicited a number of ideas from the public as well as internally, and basically dedicated a certain amount of their resources and time to trying to solve a bunch of COVID-relevant problems, whether it's finding, antibodies that might bind to SARS-CoV-2, or, finding ways to lower the cost of production of the new vaccines, but also, a completely separate effort to stand up, a COVID testing, distributed COVID testing organization within Ginkgo that's still running, and, has been actually, I think, doing, I think, the majority, the largest single provider of K through 12 pooled COVID testing in the United States. So, is an opportunity for the company to step back and say, how can we help directly, but also serve as a forcing function and help the team say, all right, what can we do in the time we have to sprint towards some sort of new goal.
Great. What were the past 2 years like for you?
Yeah, so they were certainly interesting. I moved to, from another company to Checkerspot, and actually, early in the pandemic and kind of through some of the more turbulent parts, we were out raising money for a subsidiary, a new company, at a company I was with called Converti. We raised money for a company called Air Protein. And so I was leading that financing round in a time where you couldn't actually meet face-to-face with investors. And it was both very efficient, but also exhausting. It was like full days being on the phone, back-to-back meetings. But I was just like astounded that we were able to do a financing round, not actually meeting face-to-face with actual investors, and a pretty significant one. And it gave me hope that there's resilience, right, within humanity and within business and within people who want to, in biomarkets and in sustainability, that we're going to get this done even though there's these hurdles. And then in joining Checkerspot, we have had both challenges from the supply chain side because we use raw materials that, to build our products that we had to source. But honestly, it's created opportunities for us as companies look for other sources. So some of our partners who we're now supplying had supply chain disruptions and came to us because we could actually supply materials to them. And that sort of started us on the right foot with them. And now it's continued and is growing our business, I think, because people are aware of these disruptions.
I definitely echo the efficiency of business development, but also the exhaustion of being on Zoom all day. I am just so happy to be away from my computer for a few days. So let me just, as we start to wrap up the panel, see if you have any kind of final words of wisdom for the startups in the room about how to navigate.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is super important is to make what we're doing real. So to find ways to make real products. And this is for startups, right? Because there's a lot of companies in the room who have products already who are established and are brands. But when you're coming to market with something new, make it real. So invest in the capabilities. Just put the time in to make things that are real that people can actually interact with. And that will do a lot towards building momentum from the B2B side to really grow and get impact and drive scale. So I think that's probably the key takeaway I would leave you with is making things real.
Great. David, how about you? What pearls of wisdom can you share with the startups in the room?
Yeah, I think that set a strategy, execute the strategy, and be disciplined in your decision making when you move away from that strategy, but don't be afraid to change your strategy when you gather new data. And I think the other part of it that we learned, I would say to some degree the hard way, was really understand the customers you're talking to and what are their processes by which they're going to make decisions. So you might have a conversation with somebody that they're really interested and they smile at you and they're excited, but if they're not the right person to have that discussion with, or you're not engaging them at the right stage of your maturity so that you can actually interact with their innovation folks and get your material in there, you're too early, and that can actually harm your relationships long term. So understand what you have and when you need to get to a certain stage as you start to reach out to the world. It's a little bit about, I know everybody wants to get rapid market feedback, but there's a little bit of wisdom to go slow to go fast.
That's terrific. Jesse, you get the last word. So tell us, how can you help?
Yeah. I mean, I would say I was actually going to say something very similar, which is make a plan. Understand what your customers are looking for as best you can. Go have those conversations. Be ready to change those plans as you get that feedback, because every plan lasts for about 3 minutes after you get it out into the market. So be ready to adapt, but always keep in mind what the broad goal is. If you're trying to have a big impact on some market, keep that as your North Star and then figure out the way to get there.
Terrific. I guess we're designed not to have Q&A from the audience, so our speakers will be here for the rest of the day. Make sure you find some time to chat with them and get your own version of the one-on-one. And let's take a moment to thank our panel.